When a narcissist betrays you through manipulation, deceit, or abandonment, what follows can feel deeply confusing, not only because of the betrayal itself, but because of how unaffected they seem afterward, or at least how they appear. They act as though nothing happened. There's no regret, no apology, not even a sign of acknowledgement. They just move on, often louder and more confident than before, showing off new relationships, achievements, or adventures. Their indifference feels unreal, and if you've been on the receiving end of that cold silence, it's only natural to think they truly don't care, that you meant nothing to them. But that isn't exactly true. It's dangerously misleading. What you're seeing isn't calm, it isn't strength, it isn't closure, it's a performance, detachment, pretending to be peace. The narcissist must look untouched, not because they are, but because the alternative would mean facing what they cannot emotionally handle. Shame, guilt, and responsibility. These aren't just unpleasant emotions for them. They're threats to their very sense of self. To really understand why a narcissist can't find peace after betraying you, you need to understand the foundation of their personality. Their identity isn't built on self-awareness or wholeness. It's built on illusion, a carefully designed version of themselves created to protect them from feeling unworthy. Deep down, most narcissists carry a heavy sense of inadequacy, often linked to early emotional wounds or broken attachments. So, they build a false self, a mask of superiority, flawlessness, and control. Any crack in that mask, a mistake, a loss, a betrayal, feels like a direct threat to their psychological survival. So, what do? They disconnect, they emotionally evacuate, they bury guilt so far beneath denial that even they can barely feel it. When they betray you and then behave like nothing happened, it isn't because it didn't matter to them. It's because they've already activated an emotional escape route. They start spinning stories in their own mind. You were too demanding, you misunderstood, you're overreacting, they had no other choice. These justifications aren't only meant for you, they're for themselves. They need these stories to keep functioning. If they ever face the full reality of their actions, the harm they caused, the trust they broke, they would be forced to face the very emotions they've spent their whole life avoiding. So, their seeming calmness isn't peace, it's avoidance. But avoidance comes at a price. Here's the irony. By refusing to take responsibility, the narcissist thinks they're saving themselves from pain, when in reality, they're just prolonging it. Because real peace doesn't come from running away from emotions. It comes from facing and integrating them. True peace is born from owning one's actions, making amends, and learning from the experience. That's how growth happens. That's how healing works. But narcissists can't walk that path because their entire identity is built on the belief that they don't need to change, that they're already perfect, that they're never wrong. A narcissist lies not only to others, but more importantly to themselves. Those lies don't vanish, they accumulate, they build up like emotional debt growing heavier with time, and even when they seem fine on the outside, laughing, flirting, thriving, internally they're unsettled. That unease might not show right away, but it grows quietly. It seeps into their relationships, their sleep, their solitude. They become hooked on distraction, addicted to chaos, desperate for anything that keeps them from sitting still long enough to feel the truth creeping in. You might wonder if they're struggling. Why do they look like they're doing so well? That's because pain doesn't always look like sadness. Sometimes it looks like overcompensation. The narcissist, who appears to have moved on instantly, who posts happy pictures, flaunts a new partner, or brags about how great life is often the one hurting the most, because peace doesn't need to be performed. But a narcissist's identity always needs an audience, so they fake peace, they stage happiness, They craft an image meant to make you doubt yourself, while secretly fearing that you might be the one who actually found peace. That fear keeps them awake at night, not necessarily regret for what they did, but the haunting thought that someone has seen behind their mask, that someone out there knows the truth they can't control. That exposure is unbearable for them, so they double down on the act, they run faster, they create more noise, but peace isn't found in running, it's found in stillness, and stillness is something a narcissist cannot endure. The real tragedy is that many narcissists will never understand why they feel so uneasy inside, why they keep ruining good relationships, why victories feel empty, and why they constantly chase new highs that never last. It's not that they don't feel the effects of their actions. They do, but they're trapped in a system that prevents them from processing those feelings. When they betray someone who genuinely cared for them, they end up betraying themselves even more deeply. Yet instead of facing that truth, they convince themselves it doesn't matter. They wear emotional detachment like armor, pretending it's power, but inside, they're haunted by the parts of themselves they've refused to confront. Every performance, every boast, every illusion of control is built to hide that inner fracture. They hope no one notices the cracks, but deep down they do, and that's the cruelest part. They're not free. They're not peaceful. They're running from the very truth that could have saved them. Distraction, but the tension doesn't really go away. It stays beneath the surface. It whispers in the quiet hours. It interferes with their relationships, their peace, even their ability to enjoy success. It becomes a constant hum of unease that never fades. This is the true irony of the narcissistic mind. In trying to avoid the pain of looking inward, they end up creating a deeper kind of suffering, one that can't be healed by praise, attention, or power. They are not driven by calm or contentment, but by the constant urge to escape the weight of their own actions. And that escape turns into a lifelong chase. They run from silence, from reflection, from moments of stillness, because any of those might reveal something they can't handle. The truth that the betrayal didn't only wound you, it also exposed them. Now, this isn't a call for sympathy. Understanding a narcissist's torment is not about excusing their behavior. It's about seeing the mechanism behind it, because once you understand it clearly, you stop taking their coldness personally. You stop wondering why they never apologize or why they seem to move on easily while you're left to pick up the pieces. The truth is they're not really winning. They're simply surviving, barely held together by illusions, haunted by contradictions, constantly chased by the truth they can't face. This also connects to a deeper idea about the human condition. The inability to face one's own flaws doesn't bring freedom. It creates a kind of self-made prison. The narcissist, in refusing to confront guilt or take responsibility, locks themselves inside an unresolved version of who they are. They might collect wealth, fame, or attention, but inside they remain empty, and no external victory can fix that inner fracture. In betraying others, they ultimately betray themselves. That's the price of avoidance. That's the silent cage they live in every day. So when you wonder if they feel regret, if they suffer, if they stay awake at night thinking about what they've done, the answer is yes, but not in the way you imagine. Their suffering isn't open or healing. It's a quiet collapse inside, a constant denial of truth just to keep functioning. It's the pain of someone who must lie to themselves to survive. After a narcissist betrays you, there's often one question that doesn't leave your mind. Not just why did they do it, but why do they seem so bothered that I'm gone? Why do they act even worse when you finally step away? The answer isn't love or guilt, it's control. That's the real core of it. A narcissist's relationship with others is based on use, not care. That might sound cold, and it is, but it's how their mind works. To them, you're not simply a person, you're a role, a function, a source of emotional and psychological energy. You feed their ego, even if you don't realize it. They attach themselves to people who reflect the image they want to believe in. As long as you go along with that, as long as you give attention, admiration, or access, the connection holds. But once you change the script by setting boundaries, seeing them clearly, or leaving, it breaks the illusion of power they've built, and that's when they panic, because their identity isn't rooted inside. It depends on controlling how others see them. They need to shape perception, especially yours. When they betray you and you don't beg for closure, when you cut them off and keep moving, it's more than rejection. It's a threat to their sense of control. It shows them they were never as powerful as they thought. Think about what that means. Someone who believes they are special, untouchable, now faces the undeniable truth. You're living without them. You didn't collapse. You grew stronger. You didn't break. You rebuilt to the narcissist that's unbearable, not because they loved you, but because you were a mirror they could command. And now that mirror no longer reflects them, so what happens next? They don't reflect. They don't ask what they did wrong. That would require humility, something they've avoided their whole lives. Instead, they try to regain control. They might reach out with vague messages or fake apologies, or they might turn aggressive, spreading lies, pulling others into their story, rewriting the past to make themselves look like the victim. None of this is about truth or healing. It's about power. It's about getting you to react because your reaction means they still matter. Here's what's happening deep inside them. When a narcissist loses control over someone they once dominated emotionally, it causes what psychologists call a narcissistic injury. It's more than disappointment. It's a wound to their ego. It breaks their fantasy of being untouchable. And because they can't process that kind of wound in a healthy way, they lash out, they obsess, or they rush toward new distractions to fill the gap. That's why so many narcissists repeat the same cycle with new people. The faces change, but the story stays the same. Idealize, devalue, discard, and if that fails, circle back to regain control or paint the other person as the villain. It's never really about you as an individual. It's about their desperate need to feel in charge. If they can't control you anymore, they want to control how you remember them. This is something crucial to understand. Your silence feels like punishment to them. Not because you intended it that way, but because it cuts off their emotional oxygen. Narcissists feed off reactions, good or bad, love or anger, praise or outrage. It all fuels them. It tells them they matter, that they still hold space in your world. When you stop responding, when you heal quietly, when you stop feeding their illusion, you take away that power. You leave them alone with the emptiness they've been avoiding, and they'll do anything to escape that feeling. So when we say narcissists can't find peace after betrayal, this is why, because peace requires surrender, and surrender to them feels like destruction. They can't release the need for control. It's built into their entire identity. Even when they act as if they've moved on, they still keep small threads of control alive. They might check your social media, ask mutual friends about you, or reappear out of nowhere after a long time. Not because they care, but because the control isn't completely gone, it's just weaker. That's what makes your healing so powerful. Not because it punishes them, but because it breaks the cycle. You're no longer reacting. You're no longer part of their performance. You've stepped back into your own truth, and in doing that, you destroy the illusion of control, not through revenge or anger, but through indifference. That's their real loss. Not the end of the relationship, not the argument, but the slow, undeniable truth that you've slipped beyond their reach, that you're no longer orbiting their world, that their betrayal didn't ruin you. It released you, And that freedom, that peace you rebuild in their absence, becomes the one thing they can never touch. People often think that once a narcissist betrays someone and ends the relationship, they move on cleanly without guilt, without regret, without any emotional consequence. And yes, that's how they want to appear. They leave with confidence, acting unaffected, even proud. They jump into new relationships, show off their life online, surround themselves with noise and distractions. But behind that mask lies something far more fragile. Over time, it becomes corrosive. When they lose narcissistic supply after betrayal, it doesn't bring them relief. It brings collapse, because what they've lost isn't just a person. It's their reflection. Narcissistic supply isn't just about being admired or complimented. It's their psychological fuel. It's the validation that keeps their unstable self-image from falling apart. While you were around, you were a source of that energy. Whether you admired them, feared them, or simply paid attention, every reaction was a mirror reflecting back who they wanted to be. But once they betray you, and especially once you go no contact, that mirror disappears. Worse, it now reflects something they can't tolerate, someone who's no longer under their control, someone who sees through the illusion, someone who doesn't play their game anymore. That kind of loss shakes them deeply. For most people, the end of a relationship brings sadness, reflection, and eventually growth. But for a narcissist, losing supply feels like a collapse of identity. Without you feeding their image, they're left exposed to what's underneath. And that's a self they've spent years hiding from. That's when the real unraveling begins. At first, they may respond with anger, blame, or immediate replacement. But in time, something deeper sets in. A quiet erosion, because no matter how many new people they charm, or how many distractions they chase, it never quite fills the void. Not if you were someone who saw them clearly. Not if your absence broke through the illusion they tried to keep alive. The philosopher Kierkegaard once said, "The worst kind of despair is the one that doesn't even know it's despair." That perfectly describes the narcissist after betrayal. On the outside, they may seem busy or even thriving, but inside there's a gnawing emptiness. They don't know how to name it, let alone face it, because to admit it would mean admitting that their worth depends on how others see them, and that realization threatens everything they've built. This is why many narcissists move from one person to the next, one project to another, always searching for that lost sense of power or importance. But the more they chase external validation, the hollower it becomes. Deep down, they're still running from the same fear. The fear of being insignificant, the fear that without attention or control, they simply fade. What's both fascinating and sad is that most narcissists don't even understand this about themselves. They'll blame others, they'll stew in resentment, they'll make every breakup or failure about being betrayed or misunderstood. They'll keep fighting invisible battles to prove they still matter, but none of that touches the real wound. They've lost the connection that kept their fragile identity together. They've lost their supply, and what replaces it is not peace but confusion, a dizzying psychological void they can't escape. This is also